What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. It seems that in the era of the transfer portal, there's so many kind of rumors and reports about Duke being attached to certain players that sometimes it changes within the same day. You see a report of something and it changes within the same day. And it's because of that fluidity, I guess, of news that I'm withholding from recording every other day, because I don't want to put too much stock or emphasis on reporting related to one player when Duke's really not having much of a chance at actually adding that player. So I'll get into some of the other options for Duke adding players in the portal, but let's do a little bit of an off-season debriefing for a second to start this episode off. I came in kind of hot talking about portal stuff. So debriefing, Duke loses 7 players in the transfer portal. Sean Stewart, TJ Power, Jaden Shute, Christian Reeves, Mark Mitchell, Jalen Blakes, and Jeremy Roach. 2 of those 7 are already committed to a new school, Roach at Baylor and Mark Mitchell at Missouri. I like those fits for those guys. Duke also lost 2 players to the NBA draft, Jared McCain and Kyle Filipowski, as well as 2 more scholarship players to pure graduation, being Ryan Young and Spencer Hubbard. With that, Duke lost 11 of its 13 scholarship players and returned only 2, Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster. Now, the Blue Devils are bringing in 6 highly coveted 5-star freshmen, highlighted by Cooper Flagg and Common Maliq, who are 2 of the top 3 players in next year's class and both projected top 5 picks, projected number 1 pick in Flagg's case. They're joined by 5-star Isaiah Evans, 5-star Patrick Ngongba, 5-star Conkinapel, and also 4-star Darren Harris. So although Harris was brought up to a top 30 recruit recently, so that's big time, and I think well-deserved for Harris. Now let's talk about the 2 guys that I haven't talked about being commits. Now, I've talked plenty in the last episode, or at least I talked about Malik Brown from Syracuse and Mason Gillis from Purdue. Now, I want to talk a little more at length about those 2 players, because since the last time I recorded, both players have now officially committed to Duke. Now, we were under the impression that was going to happen at the time that recording happened. But now let's look at what does Duke's roster look like as it stands with 10 guys. And what do Brown and Gillis bring to Duke? You've got those guys, and you've also got 3 open scholarships. What kind of guys does Duke need to go after with those 3 scholarships, and what kind of names are popping up? So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about here today.
Want to join a community of Duke accounts publishing news, theories, and predictions on Duke athletics? Join the Duke Wisdom Network. Just go to dukewisdom.org/join network today and fill out the form with your name and social media. Or you can DM at Duke_Wisdom on Twitter or Instagram. Become a part of the community of Duke fans publishing their takes today. Again, that's dukewisdom.org/join network or DM at Duke_Wisdom on Twitter or Instagram.
So let's talk about what the rotation can be expected to be. Without any other significant addition in the portal, let's just say off of what we know, the 10 guys we know will be in Durham, what would the rotation look like? Well, Proctor and Foster in the backcourt is a pretty obvious duo. I think at the moment I would say Cooper Flagg would start at the 3, Malik Brown at the 4, and Common at the 5, with the bench kind of being Isaiah Evans, Mason Gillis kind of primarily, but then also Ngongba and Kinapel and then Harris, kind of in that order, I think, off the bench. So what does Malik Brown bring to Duke? A few things. He brings high-level defense, first and foremost. A first-team All-ACC defender last year at Syracuse. I'm sure you know about that. But I think what's important is he brings knowledge of the college game defensively. Duke has probably the 2 most raw, defensively skilled dogs, maybe in college basketball next season, in Cooper Flagg and Common Maliq. Like, Maliwach's reach is ludicrous. Him as a shot blocker is unreal. And then when you take Cooper Flagg into consideration as well, it's sort of just like a man, like, how do you stop this? Right? Like how do you get through Duke's frontline defense? It's not easy. And now John Shire has made this team look like they want the other team to score 40 points a game, because adding Malik Brown to that front court makes that 3-man front court defensive unit just what I just said, a unit. It's very difficult to get through and score on that front line. Malik Brown led the ACC in steals, so that's just another dynamic to his defensive game. He has counting numbers defensively, but he's efficient as well. And it's not just that, it's also rebounding. Defensive rebounding is a big part of how good you are as a defender, and Malik Brown he's a terrific defensive rebounder. He averaged 7 a game last season, just under 10 points a game. He's not a high-level scorer, but he's an efficient one. About 10 points per game on 70% shooting is the important mark here. That is fantastic efficiency. He's a good defender. He's an efficient player. What Malik Brown is for Duke is dependable and consistent. That's what he will be for the Blue Devils. And he's what currently is one of 3 players above a sophomore classification. He, Proctor, and Mason Gillis. And so when you talk about Malik Brown, it's like you're getting a dependable scorer in the interior who is capable of really running it up if he gets enough looks, because he's so efficient. He had 26 against Duke. I've talked about that. A lot of people have talked about that. And what he brings defensively is important, but also what he brings as a dependable player in the paint, because that is something Duke doesn't have. And while Malik Brown he's not a center. He's not a center. So obviously Brown's not going to be that kind of Derek Lively center. He's not going to be a backup like Theo John, like big man. But, he's only 6'8", 6'9". So he's not a center, but he can play in the paint. View him sort of like a version of Emile Jefferson almost, I think. It's not quite a one-for-one comparison, obviously, but a guy that can defend. He can block shots, get in there, disrupt, wreak havoc. Not the tallest big, but can play in the paint and score efficiently in the paint. I think it's not that much of a stretch. And so for me, it's like Duke did play seasons with Emile Jefferson at the 5. They weren't their best seasons, 2014, namely 2017. And Malik Brown's a guy that it's like, if you want to play some small ball and you want to slide Cooper Flagg to the 4, or even, Mason Gillis to the 4, you could feasibly play Malik Brown at the 5. That is something that can be done. It's something that probably won't be done for long stretches, but it's an option. But overall, whether Shire decides to do that or not, Malik Brown provides a player that is a dependable paint presence and an older paint presence, because the 2 that Duke has are sort of question marks. Patrick Gong being a guy that is coming off injuries. There's some concerns there, although Brendan Marks did report recently that Duke does not intend to redshirt Patrick. So Patrick should be in the rotation playing minutes. And I expect him to honestly kind of be the main backup for Common. But I think that they have a little more diversity with what they can do in the paint because of Malik Brown. Now, let's put it bluntly. If Maliq isn't ready to produce at a pretty high level by March, and people will say, well, he's raw, just in case you need another like higher level center or something in the portal, I disagree. If Common Maliq isn't ready to go by March, if like he's not what we think he is by March, Duke's not winning the national title. Just plain and simple, they're not. And that same thing goes for Flagg or the backcourt. That's just how it is. A lot's going to be on that kid's shoulders, whether you like it or not. But I think you might like it a little more than you think if you're tentative about him. I mean, right now he's cooking. He's absolutely cooking in NBA Academy Africa, but he's playing some games over in Africa right now. He's dropping consistently 20 something points a game, 10 to 15 rebounds a game, and then like 6 or so blocks a game, which is really staggering. He's such a diverse talent defensively and offensively. Yeah, he has some rawness to his game that we've discussed. He hasn't played that long. His timing on blocks sometimes gets a little jumpy. His hands are there most of the time, sometimes not quite. Sometimes he's got a tendency to get a little overexcited on finishes and will botch a dunk or something like that. But he's also got the plays where he can play back to the basket, a crossover, spin, fadeaway jumper as a 7'2" big is nasty work, man. That guy is he's incredible. He really is, and he can be one of the best players in the country next season for Duke. So, and that's what they want him to be. He'll probably fall somewhere a little below what his true potential is because he'll realize that once he's in the NBA. But Malik Brown is a dependable player, and he's especially important in the early parts of the season. He's a player that I think a lot of Duke fans will fall in love with. He also has decent shot mechanics. Like his three-point shot mechanics aren't bad. His three-point percentage isn't bad. Some people are quick to point that out. 37%, nothing to shake your head at. However, it was just 6 of 16, so that context really matters. That he's not a high-volume shooter. That's about a shot per every 2 games. I think if Duke can get him to the point where he's shooting like 1 to 2 threes a game and he can shoot that same clip, that's really dangerous because if he can get to the point where you've got to respect him out on that 3-point line, then Duke has 5 guys that you have to respect on the 3-point line. Now, are Maliq and Flag necessarily high-level 3-point shooters at the moment? I don't know that I'd say that, but they're good, and they're definitely good enough to go out and respect them. And if Malik Brown can get to that level, and you can have those 3 guys at that level, plus who I hope make the jump from decent, solid guard 3-point shooters to consistent, big-time threats from 3, with Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor, Duke needs both of those guys shooting over 40 from 3. For this to be the optimal lineup, they need that 3-point shooting because Proctor and Foster have to be able to make those threes to free up the lane for Cooper Flag, to free up the dunker spot for Maliq, to free up those looks in the paint for Brown. And so that's what Malik Brown does. In this current iteration of Duke's rotation, without adding anyone else of significant value, I would expect Malik Brown to be the starting power forward. The other guy Duke got, Mason Gillis. He's 23 years old. He'll be 24 by the time the season starts, so he'll easily be Duke's oldest player. Gillis is from Purdue. He played in the national championship last year. I talked about this on the last episode. He was the Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year. He did only average 6 points a game, so it's not like he's a high-volume scorer. If you look at his shot chart, he shot about 40 times inside the arc, and about over half of those occurred right inside basically the charge circle, so like layups, post looks, essentially. And then he shot 140 3-pointers. So he shot 3 times as many threes as he did 2-point field goals. Mason Gillis is the absolute dictionary definition of a 3-and-D player. He's built stout. He's not going to give up a lot of looks easily. He's only 6'6", but he'll play like he's a little taller than that. He can defend. He can hold his ground. He's got great experience playing for a Purdue team that was a 1 seed 2 consecutive seasons, being the 6th man of the year for that team. And then he shot, 46, 47% from 3 last season, which I talked about last episode that I don't think that high of a percentage is as sustainable for Duke, especially, considering there's no Zach Edey. Yes, Common Maliq and Cooper Flag are very pervasive forces for opponents, but they're not Zach Edey. They're not drawing that much paint attention. They're not going to free up the same level of 3-point looks that Edey freed up. They'll certainly free him up, though. So Mason Gillis will do a very important thing for Duke off the bench: provide experience and provide a consistent 3-point shooter who can defend and is dependable in games. That's the through line of what the 2 guys Duke has got out of the portal so far. Dependability. They are dependable veterans that Duke knows they can put in the game, and they will produce to some level. Are they guys that you're going to look at to go, you need to take us to the promised land? Absolutely not. Unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it for Duke, they're depending on a couple of 17-year-olds and as well as Tyrese Proctor, really, to bring them to the promised land. But for Brown and for Gillis, it is a big-time dependability thing. They're huge for Duke. And especially, I talked about Gillis being important for providing age to the bench. I don't want to understate that, because Foster, Proctor, Brown in this current, imagining of the rotation, those three guys are starting. And since those three guys are the only other three guys who aren't freshmen in the current iteration of the team, Gillis is the only non-freshman coming off the bench at the moment. Obviously, that's going to change as Duke adds another couple guys from the portal, but he's important. He provides a lot of experience for this Duke team. He is the most experienced player on this Duke team by a couple of years, actually, given that Brown and Proctor are both true juniors. So he's very important. I have my doubts that his percentages will be as high, and I don't think anyone should expect any more points per game than he averaged at Purdue, about 6. But that's not to say he's going to be unimportant, because look at what Matt Jones was able to do as a 3-and-D player for the 2015 team, averaging about 5 or 6 points a game. He was incredibly important, had a massive game against Gonzaga in the Elite Eight in 2015. Players like that matter. And I think if you're Duke right now, you've got a pretty promising 8 guy rotation at the moment. When you've got that lineup that I talked about with Gillis, Evans, and then, probably Gongba at the moment, I think I'd like one more decent level transfer that can be placed into these games and is dependable and not just a roster filler. I don't know that Duke needs to use all 3 of its remaining scholarships on guys who are like, they need to be in the game. Because, and I know that there's the tendency that you see these injuries that happen, you want guys that can come in and back it up. I understand that. I'm a Bucks fan. Right now, the Bucks are about to lose to a highly inferior Pacers team because Giannis is out, Damian's out, Chris is battling injuries. Bobby Portis got ejected in Game 4. Like, it's tough to see so many players out, and then to see the guys behind them just aren't ready for that moment. And so the tendency is to you want these guys to come in and be ready and be good players that can be ready to produce when the first unit guys go down. I get it. I understand that. But at the end of the day, if those second unit guys are having to play multiple games in March, and Duke's not going to win the national title anyway, like that's the nature of college basketball. If you've got multiple starters out, or you got your best player, second best player out, you're not cutting the nets. That's just how it is. A lot of it is a game of luck, and it sucks. But that doesn't mean I think that they shouldn't strive for some depth. I think it's important, though, to layer that depth, to layer it with, you've got transfers that are high-level rotation players, guys that can be in rotation and be productive, and then guys who don't really need to be in rotation are good practice veterans. That kind of thing. A Cale Catchings type guy might be what you see that last scholarship used on, I think. And I think that Duke's name hasn't been tied to at least one of the last 3 scholarships. At least one of the players that those last 3 scholarships are going to be used for, at least one of them, Duke's name has not been tied to at all. Maybe 2, maybe even all 3 of them, actually. So let's get in a little bit to what I expect Duke to be going after. There was a report by Aaron Torres that Duke was going after Lamont Butler. And I'll tell you right now, I loved this. I loved that because in my opinion, it was just like another dog, another defender. It gives Shire the option of going to that 3-guard lineup he really likes, or switching in and out another point guard. It would have been really, really useful, I think. But the problem was convincing Butler to exist in the same place and time as Proctor and Foster and probably come off the bench, which is a hard sell. Ultimately, that delusion didn't really last long, because within that same day, and this is what I was alluding to at the beginning of the episode, within that same day, Lamont Butler had committed to Kentucky and to play for Mark Pope. So, that's just how it is. Sometimes in the portal, you see Duke's name tied to somebody, there's nothing really there. For weeks now, about half the fan base has been losing their mind over Kobe Bray, who is a high-level player. I mean, anytime your Final 5 are the 5 premier programs of college basketball, Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, UConn, obviously you're a highly sought-after player. Kobe Bray is a 50% three-point shooter. He is obviously going to be crucial to any of those teams that he were to land on. For me, Duke didn't need him. And there's reports about what was asked for in NIL. I never liked those reports. Jeremy Roach shot that down when it was talked about what that report was for Baylor. And I don't hold a lot of stock into that 1.8 million asking price that was floated around for Bray. I don't really buy stock when I see those numbers. Honestly, I don't look into those very much, and I don't think anybody really should. Kobe Bray for me wasn't a necessary add for Duke. Once they added Mason Gillis, who I think is a better fit, might I add, and once they added Malik Brown, I was just sort of like, okay, I wouldn't fight it. He's a good player. I just don't know why he needs to be here when Duke has freshman 5-star players who do a similar, very, very similar job. Like Khan and Darren they're high-level three-point shooters on the wing that are the exact same height. And it's like, are they as polished? No, because they're 17, 18 years old. But they're good. And I just didn't see the point in adding Kobe Bray for that skill set and height classification. And I think that a similar thing he saw. So Kobe Bray made that visit to UConn on Thursday, and then it was announced that same day, early in the day, by Adam Zagoria. I think he said that he would be visiting Duke on like Sunday or something, but then later that day, Steve Wiseman from the N&O said that no, actually, Kobe Bray's not going to make that visit. And so it became pretty clear that the Huskies had their guy at that point. So for me, it's we're looking at other guys. The guys that Duke has been tied to name-wise in the portal probably aren't who they're actually going to get. I do want to talk about a report from Deshaun London from 24/7 Sports, who has tied Duke's name to Wooga Poplar. I think that one's very interesting. I don't know about this because, again, Poplar, same height kind of classification as Gillis, Evans, Kennepel, Harris. Does Duke really need another guy like that? I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think there's a place for it, but then there becomes a fight for that fifth starting spot, I think, if Poplar comes in. That is, do you play Poplar with Flagg and Flagg at the 4 or Flagg at the 3, Brown at the 4? Now, Wooga Poplar, I think, could fit in well. He's more talented than Duke's current 2 transfer portal commitments, but less consistent. A very high volume shot taker when he's effective, which I don't know if that's what Duke needs. I'm a little weary about him. I don't know if Duke's really the leader here. I think there's places where Wooga Poplar can go be the man with a capital T. And I don't think Duke is one of those places because at Duke, he's like the 5th fiddle. So I don't think that Duke's going to be the landing spot for Poplar. I did think it was interesting that their name has been tied to him. Duke's name has been tied to a few other players who are really high level, high caliber players that I just don't think they really have too much of a chance at. I don't know if that's smoke and mirrors or if Shire is trying to actually add another high level player or if they're just kind of throwing their name in there, just seeing what sticks. Like Kadari Richmond from Seton Hall. That just doesn't seem like a guy that's going to land at Duke with the personnel they currently have. I think Duke's going after, got to add at least one more guy who can realistically be a part of this. I think at some level, to some degree, they're going to add some sort of other guard that can kind of run out there with Proctor and Foster. But I've mentioned this many times before. It doesn't really need to be a guy who goes out and plays this really vital role in the rotation. I think there will be one more transfer that plays a good rotation role, especially earlier in the season. I am interested to see how they stack this positionally. I really hope that 2 out of these 3 scholarships aren't used for 2 6'6", 6'7" or so guards, or not guards, but 6'6" wings or so, because Duke's got plenty of those. So I hope they get a little more diverse with the commitments from here on out. But Shire is clearly building a team around Cooper Flagg, a team that is designed to succeed for Cooper Flagg and Common Malawach. And I think that's what he needs to do. There's a lot of rebuilding. Rebuilding is happening every offseason now. And so I think that's something that you've got to get used to a little bit. But Duke's not really eyeing a big class next season like they had this year. I mean, 0 commitments so far for the class of 2025. I expect that to change over the summer. But, I don't think it's going to be a 6-man class. It's going to be a smaller class for Duke in 2025. So that'll be interesting to look and see how that develops next offseason, but that's way in the future. To end, let's talk a little bit about the NBA playoffs just a bit. In the NBA season, Grayson Allen, he hurt himself and hurt Duke recruiting, who signed a $70 million contract, was officially the NBA three-point percentage champion. He got a trophy for that, highest three-point percentage in the league. So that's big time for Grayson. But the Suns didn't have as much luck. They ended up getting swept by Minnesota, and that was tough. But if you look at some of the other guys for Duke in the NBA, obviously there's Kyrie Irving, who had a big 40 piece in the last game. Wasn't enough. They came back from down 31 to the Clippers, took the lead, but still lost the game, which was unfortunate. That series is tied up 2-2. That should be a barn burner, a really good one. Massive rolls by he, and then also good minutes from Derek Lively and Mason Plumlee on the other side for the Clippers. Obviously, the Pelicans are about to go down the crapper. Brandon Ingram just hasn't looked the same since he came back, right before that those play-in games, he came back from an injury, and Ingram just hasn't been the same guy. Zion hasn't, been able to play. He got hurt in that play-in game, and that's been really tough for New Orleans as well. So those are tough injuries. Obviously, this could be Jason Tatum's year. If the Boston Celtics don't make it to the NBA Finals, they failed. Quite frankly, because of the injuries and collapse of the Bucks, you're going to get a Pacers-Knicks conference finals in all likelihood, and then Boston's going to wipe the floor with whoever wins between Cleveland and Orlando. But side note on Orlando, shout out to Paulo and company for making that an 0-2 deficit now a tied series 2-2. Paulo's been huge. He might be able to lead the Magic to the second round in his second season, and that is massive for Mr. Boncaro. I don't want to undervalue that, but Orlando's not good enough to beat Boston. Boston would win that series easily against either team, and then probably fairly easily win the conference finals matchup. Boston should have no trouble making it to the finals. The question is, can Jason Tatum in his second finals appearance get over that hump? Can he beat Nikola Jokic? That's really the question, right? Can he beat Jokic? So we'll see. And I think that's going to be an interesting finals if it happens. I think that's likely to happen. And I'm looking forward to it. So Duke could potentially have its first finals MVP this season. I'd probably favor the Nuggets in that matchup. But if you're looking at can Duke have a champion, obviously Jason Tatum is the top option. There's no Jack White in Denver this year, so the Nuggets wouldn't provide a Duke champion. If somehow Minnesota made that push, they've looked really good. Duke does have Wendell Moore Jr. playing for the Timberwolves. You don't have to worry about anyone else winning out of the East. There's no need in even talking about it. So there's that. And so that's kind of a little bit of an NBA playoff outlook. I'll talk a little more about that as it progresses, and I'll talk a little more about the portal additions as that progresses and Duke adds more names and fills out those last few spots of the roster. April's coming to a close. We're about to go into May. That'll kind of close up. Obviously, the portal entries will literally 100% end in a couple of days on May 1st. Then we have the NBA lottery to look forward to, obviously. Excited to see the destinations for Flip and McCain in June in the NBA draft. So some NBA stuff to look forward to, some more portal additions to look forward to, and we'll break down next season as well. Speaking of other things that are exciting to look forward to, I'm planning on launching a new X/Twitter page for Duke Wisdom dedicated to non-football, women's basketball, and men's basketball sports. So that's something you really want to follow right now because Duke baseball is a top 10 team. Duke softball is one of the best in the country. Duke men's lacrosse, although they lost to North Carolina recently, is one of the best in the country. So if you want to follow those teams as they're trying to make championship pushes, go ahead and I'll definitely tweet out when that page goes live. And you guys can follow that as well. I'm also looking for people to join the Duke Wisdom Network, or if any of my guys who have already joined the Duke Wisdom Network are listening to this, I'm looking for people to run the Duke women's basketball and the Duke football Twitter pages. So that would be a great help to help grow the brand and everything. And I'm looking for, and we'll talk about the details if that's something you're interested in. If you want a platform to talk Duke football or talk Duke women's basketball or talk other Duke athletics, you could potentially take over the page that's about to start as well. So I think that's a cool opportunity and something I'm excited about starting. As always, thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you're listening, and follow Duke Wisdom on Instagram and Twitter/X. Also, follow Duke Wisdom women's basketball and football. They're not active at the moment. They will be. I'm doing more. I'm planning to do a lot more to get everything active, coverage more comprehensive as I graduate in about a little less than 2 weeks now. So that's kind of crazy. But thanks for listening so much, guys, and I'll talk to you later.